Hi there. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can quantize your audio. So, like MIDI, we can quantize audio. Just be aware, it's not quite as flexible as quantizing MIDI. I'm just going to open up this bass part that we recorded recently. And now I'm going to use the quick quantize option to quantize my audio. So I'm just going to zoom in a bit. Here we can see our grid is on an adaptive setting. I'm just going to change this to quarter note. This way, when we quantize it, we'll have a better chance of each of these notes starting on the bar. Right, now I'm just going to press Quick Quantize shortcut, which is Command-U on a Mac or Control-U on Windows. We can see there these notes have all been moved into time. Something else you'll notice is these little orange markers have appeared. These are what we call warp markers. These are basically points that Ableton has assigned where it has noticed there is a transient. A transient is a spike in audio, so the transients here are the start of each of our notes. We can actually click and drag these and move them around if we like. So we could even change the rhythm of this part. Let's listen back to it. See, those notes are all starting on beat 1 of each bar. I'll just press undo so we can listen to it unquantized. And I'll press redo now. So, in this situation, it's done a really good job. Right, let's look at the other piece of audio we recorded. Now, I'm just going to press Command-U once again to quick quantize. Now we'll listen back. So the last 3 notes have been quantized perfectly in time, but this first one hasn't. That's because you may notice this warp marker isn't actually in time with this transient. I'll zoom in a bit more so you can see. See there, the warp marker is at the very start of this clip and isn't actually on this note. So what we can do is actually draw in transient markers. There's a couple of ways of doing so. I can right-click on this little grey area here and select Insert Warp Marker. Now it's added a new warp marker. We can delete them by right-clicking and going up to Delete. So now a warp marker is gone. Alternatively, you can double-click up here and it'll add a new warp marker. One thing to note, since I've added that new warp marker, I'll still need to quantize it. And also, when adding warp markers, I'd always recommend zooming right in to make sure the warp marker starts at the point where the audio crosses this line in the middle. So that is about there. I could even delete that one and move it over very slightly. I might draw it in here, so I'm just going to double click. If you double click, it'll just draw in one warp marker, whereas if you right click, it'll add more warp markers wherever it thinks it needs them. Okay, I'm just going to try quantizing again. So I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut Command-U. That one has been quantized correctly, but you'll notice this one still hasn't. So I'm just going to select this warp marker. I'm actually going to click and drag it to the position I would like. See there, it's snapped back to the start of the bar. Let's listen back once more. That's perfectly in time with our grid. Now, a couple more things I want to mention quickly. If you're unable to draw in warp markers, you just need to make sure that this icon here, which says warp, is active. See, when I take that off, all of our warp markers have gone, and this clip will now be out of time. So make sure this is enabled. Something else you'll need to do if you have to click on the warp icon is make sure you re-engage loop. Because right now, this clip is no longer going to be looping. So the clip will only play through once. Sometimes you may want to do this, but right now I don't want to, so I'm just going to select loop. Now when I play it back again. Now another thing I'll mention very briefly is warp mode. So, Ableton will do its best to try and quantize your audio in the most subtle way possible, but there are a couple of different settings you can try depending on the type of audio. Now, when working on percussive parts, you want to have warp mode set to beats. This is the most appropriate setting for when working with percussive sounds. However, if I was quantizing something harmonic, for example this bass part, if it starts to sound a bit strange, you may want to try using a different setting, for example tones. Now I'll just open up the quick help for a moment. If you're ever unsure of what type to use, just hover your mouse over this box and it will give you a brief description of the different warp modes. It's not always essential to do this, but if you've noticed your audio starts to have some strange artifacts, try out a couple of these different types. I'd recommend looking at beats, tones and texture first. Something else I mention is you can actually warp any audio file. So if you've chosen a sample from the browser, you can use these warp modes to actually quantize it so it matches with your project. You can even move notes around to change a rhythm. Right, so that's the very basics of audio editing, and that should be enough to get you started. I hope you found this video useful.